My name's Ben Shave and I'm a Development Officer at Supporters Direct. The first thing I should say is thanks for the invitation. I've been doing this job for 4 years now, and Supporters Direct has been in existence for the last 12 years, but it's always great to see that there are new initiatives, there's new interest in the idea of supporter ownership and supporter involvement. And as you can see from the map and the slide, we started off in the UK, and in the last 12 years we've slowly spread, the work has slowly spread out across Europe. In the UK, the Supporters Trust movement started back in 1992 with the first Supporters Trust at Northampton Town, a small club from the Midlands. And it really got going around 2000, which was when Supporters Direct was set up to provide advice and to provide support to fans who were interested in either setting up a trust, their own club, or in some cases forming their own club. And then, as I said, in 2007 we started working outside the UK. We actually approached UEFA, because we've been getting inquiries from people from other countries, and at that time we didn't really have the resources to help them. But we approached UEFA and said, look, you know, you're the governing body of European football. There's a lot of problems, financial problems, across Europe within football, and we believe that supporters can be part of the solution. And happily, UEFA agreed. So since then, they've supported our work outside of the UK, and we work with supporters trusts at clubs. So, for example, here in Denmark, we've been working with the Brøndby Supporters Trusts for a few years. There's also a supporters trust at Aarhus, and now one at Aalborg as well, which is fantastic. And then in some countries like France or Italy, we work with national organisations, because the movements there have got so big that the trusts have formed an umbrella organisation, if you like. As I'll talk about in a minute, the situation in each country is obviously different. You know, the fan culture and the football culture in each country is different, but all of the groups that we work with do have certain aims and characteristics that they all share. So this is basically what we do in 4 slides. We believe that without supporters there would be no football. Football wouldn't exist as we know it. And we believe that as a result of that, supporters should be involved in the ownership and the decision-making process of their club. You know, they shouldn't be treated as just a cash machine, as just the source of income, but they should have a seat at the table, and they should be able to participate when the time comes to make a decision. We also believe that football clubs and sports clubs in general aren't just businesses. They shouldn't exist just to line the pockets of a few rich men. That they have a social and community value that goes beyond that. One of the things that we often say is that 90% of football clubs never really win anything. I mean, I know I'm in the home of the current Danish champions, but you know, most clubs don't win anything, but people still go because it's a social activity. You know, people go. I go to football to see my friends, to have a beer, to catch up with people. It's not just about what happens on the pitch. We also believe that, similar to the first point, there should be a good relationship and an open dialogue between the people in charge of football at clubs, but also nationally, and fans. If there's no dialogue between the different parties, then that leads to problems with security and so forth. And we also believe that a more general point, that sport, like any other area of life, any other social institution, should be well governed. It should be transparent, and it should be sustainable. So how do we do that? How do we get towards what we believe in? Well, we help supporters, different clubs set up supporters trusts. So we guide people through the process. You know, we help establish meetings like this and guide with the communications. And then once a trust is set up, we help them get involved to get a seat at the table, if you like. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes clubs and authorities and governments are interested in what we have to say and what we have to do. So if they ask, then we tell them what we think. We've done reports for governments in a few countries about how they can, how football can work better with supporters. We've done the same thing for clubs and some FAs as well. And one of the main ways of doing that is through supporter liaison officers. So The concept comes from Germany, which, as I'll talk about in a minute, is a good example for supporter involvement. But a supporter liaison officer is an employee or a volunteer at the club whose job it is to act as a bridge between the club and the fans. So this is something that works really well in Germany and has done for the last 20 years or so. And in 2010, UEFA made it a condition of their licensing requirement. So any club that plays in Europe, the Europa League or the Champions League, has to have a supporter liaison officer. And one of our main activities is working with clubs and national associations to ensure that this requirement is fulfilled. I haven't met personally the SLO here at Aalborg, but I understand from Rasmus that he's a good example. And okay, well there you go. I've heard good things about him. Yeah, absolutely, good stuff. So actually, I said Germany and Sweden are some of the best examples for SLOs, but I'm not just saying this because you're in the room. I've heard that really good things are happening in Denmark as well. So, as I said earlier, each situation in each country is different, but all the groups that we work with have some core goals. They want to improve the relationship between clubs and supporters. They want to have influence over the people at the club that make the decision. Sometimes that means full ownership of the club. Sometimes that means a presence at the AGM through shareholding. Sometimes, as you'll hear about from Suna later, it means being on the board as well, the board of directors. All the groups that we work with are democratic. That's really important. This is one of our core principles. There's too many examples within football of things going wrong when one or two people make the decisions. And we believe that democracy is a better way of guarding against this. And all the groups that we work with are inclusive. They're non-violent and they don't discriminate and they don't exist to make profits, so any money that they do make is put back into their activities. So just to talk about some of the examples of the countries where we work. This is a photo from the annual general meeting of Schalke, a big member-owned club in Germany. Just to say briefly about Germany, it's almost unique around Europe in that the regulation of football says that clubs have to be owned by the supporters. So you might think, well, this doesn't really have much relevance for us, or it might not have much relevance for England, but the other thing that they do really well in Germany is having supporters and members of the clubs as part of the dialogue. So at this AGM from last year at Schalke, they had 9,000 people at the AGM. So, they have 125,000 members, but still 9,000 people at an AGM is a pretty good number. And the communication between the club and the supporters is open, and the AGM is the central way of getting this done, which I think would definitely have relevance for what you guys are trying to achieve. Being at the AGM, being able to make your collective voice heard is really important. Moving across to the Republic of Ireland, it's a country that was hit quite hard by the financial crisis a few years ago. Before the crisis, the football clubs tended to be owned by rich men who were involved in the property market often. And when that collapsed in Ireland, that left a lot of clubs with a few problems, let's say. And actually the supporters, so a number of supporters trusts took over the running of their clubs, and this photo is from Cork City. So they're currently top of the Irish Premier League. They've been a supporter-owned club since 2010. And the idea of here today, here forever really sums it up. Owners come and go, players come and go, managers come and go, but it's the supporters who are the one consistent factor in the lifetime of a club. A similar idea on the banner there from Italy. In Italian that means football without supporters has no soul. That's the basic translation. And this club, Taranto, they play in the 4th level in Italy. And as Rasmus was mentioning earlier, the golden share is something that they've done really successfully. So the Supporters Trust there has 2 seats on the club board, and they have a shareholding, which means that the club can't change its name, its logo, its colours or its stadium without the permission of the Supporters Trust. So they have control over all the things that make up the identity of a football club. And the idea of a golden share is something that's really really taken off in a lot of the countries where we work, because, you know, speaking realistically, you know, not every club can be owned by the fans. You know, the amount of money involved is too large and the circumstances often aren't right. But it is a realistic aim to have this golden share and to really have influence and control over the things that matter. And then going to my home country of the United Kingdom, well, Wales actually. So this is Swansea City, so a club that just over 10 years ago was at the bottom of the bottom professional division, 4th level. They were about to go out of existence. They had severe financial problems, but there was a supporters trust formed, and they raised £50,000 to keep the club going, sort of initially, and then they got a bunch of local businessmen together who together collected the money to take over the club and to take it away from the people that owned it before, who essentially used it as a way of lining their own pockets. So fast forward 12 years, Swansea City won the League Cup. They were one of only 3 teams in the Premier League to make a profit last season, and from the supporters' point of view, they're an example of what can be achieved, because again, the trust has a seat on the board. They manage the club's youth system, so they're really involved in the day-to-day decision-making process. And obviously the Swansea link used to be a nice one for Denmark, but now they've got rid of Laudrup. Maybe not so much, but it's still a really good example of how supporters can play a role in making the lives of the club better. So those are a few examples of the work that we do and the work that the groups that we work with do. What next? It's really important to have a plan, both for the short term and the long term. If you haven't got a strategy and a vision, and it sounds like you have, but then you won't achieve much. But you need to work on ideas for membership, bring more people to the table, get more people involved, promote the idea of setting up a supporters trust. I understand that the club is just about to finish a new share issue, and that there are plans for the trust to potentially take over some votes, or people can transfer the right, and that's really important because again, it gives the trust and the fans a seat at the AGM and will help them be involved in not only preserving what you have at the moment, because obviously the club is in a really good place. I mean, fingers crossed for you guys, you'll be in the Champions League group stages, which is obviously fantastic, but it's our experience with football that you never really know what might be lurking around the corner. And I know that from talking to Rasmus earlier and before today that, you know, you've had your fair share of financial problems quite recently. So you really never know what's going to happen around the corner. Not trying to be really negative, but it's a fact. So one of the key tasks for a supporters trust is to help ensure a more stable future. So think of yourselves as kind of the insurance policy, if you like, against things going wrong. Because as I said earlier, you know, without supporters, there wouldn't really be, football wouldn't exist. You know, it's the supporters that give the clubs the identity. The players come and go and everyone, but the supporters are always there. So those are just some ideas for the future. I'm going to be around for the rest of the evening, so I'm happy to take questions now or afterwards. And these are our contact details. And yeah, thanks for listening.